Hi everybody, welcome to the first part of Mrs. Chad Daniels' little video demonstration about how to make a Christmas cake or wedding anniversary cake or any celebration cake, birthday cake, whatever that you want to make. This is a very rich fruit cake, very rich fruit because there's so much dried fruit in it. And the recipe I'm using today and that I've always used is from The Art of Home Cooking, which was a recipe book that we were given when, the Ark was being built. And basically, sort of 3/4 of the way through the book, you get to the section on cakes and you've got this wonderful 2-page spread of ingredients. So I'm going to leave that there just in case any of you want to pause the video at this point so that you can make a note of the amounts for each size of tin. And that's an important point to make, is before you start making the cake. Tonight I'm not going to make the cake. I'm just going to talk you through the ingredients, talk you through the equipment, and talk you through how to actually get the best cake you can get. And tonight's sort of demonstration is really about the preparation before you make the cake. Next week I will start the next demonstration by showing you how to line the tin and how to actually make the cake and get it cooking. And then the week after that, I'll talk to you about how we feed the cake, how we look after the cake. Then the week after that, I'll show you how to marzipan a cake. The week after that, I'll show you the 2 different ways of icing cakes. And then lastly, obviously, is the decoration and taking it home. So this is going to be about a 6-week course. I'll try and keep the videos as short and swift as possible so that I keep you engaged. And if you have any questions for me or any points you'd like to raise, I'm very happy to take any emails from you or phone calls to the school if you want to. For the purposes of my cake, every year I use this 25 centimeter square tin. No loose bottoms. This is just literally an old cake tin that I've always used. And what I tend to do is I make one big cake and then I cut it, when it's cooked, I cut it into 4 quarters and I marzipan, ice and decorate each quarter, and then I give them away as presents to, relatives and friends. So that's what I'm going to do this year, the same as usual. But of course, for the purposes of making the cake, you need to take the inside sort of diameter for a circle, or the edge length for a square cake, and translate that onto this sheet here. So this cake tin is what we used to call in old money 10 inches, but it's 25 centimeters square. So this is the column here that I'm looking at for all of the ingredients. Okay, now in The Art of Home Cooking, helpfully, they actually put this twice into the book because they actually do it in the old imperial units as well. So I've literally photocopied the metric and put that under there because it's photocopied nice and dark. But in that little cookery book, you've actually got it in the imperial units as well. Very handy little book, this, because in every section it tells you, tips and techniques, and also what went wrong and why, and how to do things. It's a very good little preparatory book. So if you've got one of these at home, it's worth its weight in gold. If you haven't, good luck finding it on eBay, because they go for a lot of money on eBay. But it is one of the best little cookery books I've ever known. And I have to say, my GCSE pupils get this provided for them to borrow during their course. So I'm going to move that out the way and let you pause to have a look at the ingredients. There we go. That's a bit flatter. And I can now sort of look at the 25 centimeter square one there, and I can start straight away by looking at the different fruits that go into this cake. So we've got a huge amount, 675 grams That's over a pound in old money of currants, just currants. And currants are, of course, the dried black currant, that very, very dark, very sweet, and quite tart. So they give fruit cakes a really nice curranty, tarty kind of flavour, which enhances it. And that's a whole packet. That's a 500-gram packet of currants just on their own. That. Okay. We've got sultanas and raisins as well. Now, these are obviously from grapes, different grape varieties. And for a 25 centimetre square, it's 450 and 225. Now, it doesn't matter what kind of dried fruit you like. Obviously, over the years, I've experimented with forgetting about currants and using just, let's say, raisins, more raisins than sultanas and currants. I have to admit, further on down the line, it says mixed cut peel, which is literally bits of lemon and orange peel that they've candied. Or just cut up and dried and put into a container. I tend to leave a lot of that out. I don't like too much of that in mine, because in this recipe, it's asking for grated lemon rind anyway. That's the zest, the outer zest of the lemon that you grate on the small grater side, and I'll show you that later on. So because that's going in from 2 lemons as well, I tend to limit the amount of mixed cut peel that I put into mine, but this is your cake and you decide what you want in it. The glacé cherries, I'll talk about that later on. That's another fruit that's going in. But what I would say is, and that I need to sort of show you later on, is how to prepare these top 3. And maybe if you're using mixed cut peel, put that with that. If you add up 1, 2, 3, and the mixed peel, in total, you will get an amount of dried fruit. And then you decide what proportions you want to use. You can see that raisins, that are far fewer raisins, there's only half the amount of raisins to sultanas there. Okay. But if you count up the whole lot, so mixed cut peel and these top 3, get the amount that you want to use. That's how much to buy in. Okay, with one caveat, and that is this. Now, I don't drink alcohol, in fact, strangely enough, but I do tend to use alcohol in cooking, and I certainly do soak dried fruit in alcohol to make one of these celebration cakes. I tend to use sherry rather than brandy, but you can use any alcohol if you wish to. You don't have to use alcohol, but I would recommend you actually rehydrating your dried fruit with, if not alcohol, use some fruit juice. Apple juice, I find, is the best. So if you've got some pure apple juice in a carton or a container, and you don't want to use alcohol in this, that's perfectly good, a good idea. However, I would recommend that you do cover your fruit in juice or alcohol to soak it. Now, at that point, I would say, well, you can take all of these amounts here then, and even for a 25 centimetre square cake, you could halve them. So the mixed cut peel, raisins, sultanas, and currants. If you are going to soak your dried fruit in either juice or alcohol, don't forget the juice or alcohol is going to go into the fruit and really plump them up. So they will weigh heavier because they will absorb the liquid. So you won't need as much as the sheet actually says, because your dried fruit will be bigger. Okay, and I'm going to talk to you more about the dried fruit later on. So just bear that in mind. Okay, take this. If you aren't going to soak the cake, soak the fruit before you make the cake, then stick to these amounts, whichever belongs to the column of the size of the tin that you're using. But if you are going to soak the fruit, you won't need as much. What I tend to do though, and I've got one here to show you that I did earlier, is I tend to have the equivalent of what the Germans call a Rumtoft, which is a container that I've always got soaking in either fruit or alcohol, so that if I'm making a batch of scones with dried fruit in it, some fruit scones, I will use the fruit that I've soaked. So you could use all of the amounts, so 675, 450, 225, and also 150. Let's say if you were going to think about doing a 25 centimeter square cake, soaking them in the alcohol, and then take that amount, so whatever amount you've got, okay, that you need for the cake, and literally squeeze the alcohol or the juice out of them, and that's the amount of fruit that you're going to use in that size of cake. Okay, so I'll show you that next week when we actually make the cake. So I'll put that to one side. And then any leftover, if you've used the whole amounts, when you've used the amount that you need in your cake, you'll have some left over soaking in the alcohol or the juice. And at which point you can just keep that in the fridge with a lid on. And you, as I say, you've got something that you can dip into at any point if you're going to make something with dried fruit, and it really enhances it. And don't forget, the heat of cooking the cake is actually going to destroy most of the alcohol anyway. Okay, but alcohol is a great thing to add body and flavor and depth and sweetness to any dish that it goes into. And the heat, as I say, actually gets rid of the alcohol in cooking. Right, so let's have a look then. So we have talked about the three different sort of dried fruits here. There's nothing to stop you swapping things, only using raisins, but use the entire amount. So add that all up and the mixed cut peel, get a total, and then literally think, okay, I'm actually going to use just raisins and sultanas. I'm not going to use the mixed peel, not going to use the currants, but the whole amount, I'm just going to split between the two and experiment with the different types of fruit. Cherries. Right, so here I've got some cherries in a tub. And for the size of tin I'm using, 25 centimeters squared, it says 175 grams, which is most of a tub here. And I've got some just ordinary glacé cherries. Now, sometimes these come in a gloop, and you might be able to see down there, there's a gloop. It's a very good idea to actually wash that gloop off. So what I've got close by is a bowl of warm water that's half cold and half boiled water, and I'm actually going to put those into the water. Now, recipes tend to say use halved cherries. Okay, so I'm now washing them under the camera like so. That removes that gloop. I'm not going to cut my cherries in half. I think there's something really very nice about coming across a whole cherry. And don't forget, you're going to be mixing this. So you tend to find in mixing that you will occasionally cut one of the cherries in half anyway. But it's lovely to have whole cherries dotted throughout the cake. They will be evenly distributed, but I've put them into my washing water that I'm going to wash the fruit in later on, just to remove that gloop from around the cherries. I'll move that back to one side and we can go back to the ingredients. So you might decide, you know what, I don't want to use cherries. Again, take the amount from the sheet that it says and add other dried fruits in instead. So you can swap cherries out and maybe put some more raisins or sultanas in instead. Okay, now the next ingredient down says nuts. Now, obviously, lots of people have nut allergies. So if you're making a cake that might be eaten by somebody with a nut allergy, don't add the nuts. And there's another ingredient later on you won't be able to use. But for the purpose of this, I'm going to be using walnut halves. And again, it's quite nice having bigger chunks of nuts in your cakes because it just adds texture. Sometimes little bits of nut can just get lost in the mixture. And in this particular one, for us 25 centimeter square cake, it says use almonds 175 grams. Well, this is 100 grams, so I need to get some more. Almonds obviously are a different type of nut. They're sweeter than walnuts. I personally like walnuts because they are ever so slightly bitter, and they add a really nice texture because of the sort of frilly nature of them as they go through the cake. But you can use whatever nuts you like, and if you don't want to use them, again, take the amount that the recipe says you need and add it to the dried fruit. So I'll put that to one side. I've got my nuts half here anyway. Now, we've talked about the grated lemon rind, so you'll need to get a couple, 1 or 2 lemons in, depending on the size of the tin that you're using. So that's always useful to have. And I would put that in, you know, because that does give quite a nice additional flavour, a little bit of sort of that extra Christmassy, if it is a Christmas cake, an extra Christmassy kind of taste, that citrusy taste. So I am going to do that. Brandy. Now, if you are going to soak your fruit in alcohol, then you can miss out the brandy at this stage, because that in a normal cake would go in with all of the ingredients when you mix it. But you don't need that as well as the soaked fruit. So if you're going to soak your fruit in sherry or brandy, omit the brandy that you're going to add. You do not need to add that brandy to the cake mixture. In fact, if you do, it'll just make the mixture very, very sloppy, and that'll make a heavy cake. Now, interestingly, for a cake, this recipe doesn't call for self-raising flour. You can use it if you want to, but it's a waste of time, because this is a very, very heavy cake to start with. You've got an awful lot of dried fruit in it. So it says use just plain flour. And I wouldn't bother with any wholemeal flour either, because this is a heavy enough cake as it is with all that fruit in. So I'm going to need 450 grams, which is an old-fashioned pound of flour. And that I have got here as well. Okay, so that's my plain flour that I've got ready to go into my cake next week. Mixed spice and nutmeg. Well, you can put whatever spices you like into this. Mixed spice and nutmeg are the 2 traditional spices, but I have in the past also added some ginger, powdered ginger spice in, which gives it a warmth, a heat. Doesn't make it spicy, but it does give it a nice warmth. So does the mixed spice. And nutmeg traditionally is the, you know, one of the smells, if you like, of Christmas. So get those in your cupboard if you haven't got any in, because they do add a huge amount of flavour and give it its traditional sort of taste and smell. Now, the next ingredient down, okay, says ground almonds, and it's for my size cake, it's 125 grams. Now, again, if you're making this and somebody who's got an allergy to nuts is eating it, miss that out. And I would take that 125 grams and add, if you're not going to use ground almonds, add an extra 125 grams of flour into the mixture. The ground almonds and the flour are obviously going to give the cake its structure and its bulk. So you want the amount between those two. Add those 2 up. Okay, that's the amount you need. I am going to use ground almonds. I haven't got any here now, so I'm going to have to put that on my shopping list so that I have that with me next week. Ground almonds add a moistness to it, and that's reason as well why I don't use almonds as the nuts, because you've already got some ground almonds going in. You're going to have almond paste, also known as marzipan, going on the outside. So that's why I don't put whole or halved almonds in. I put walnuts in, which gives it an extra sort of flavor and texture. Okay, now obviously this is coming from the Stork Margarine recipe book produced by the Stork Cookery Service. You know, this is an old book. This is the Stork Cookery Service that have written the book. So, of course, they're going to promote themselves as being the, you know, the type of fat to use in this. I have used margarine and butter in the past, and to be perfectly honest, I can't tell any difference. The thing that this recipe is very good for is the fruit, that you've got spices in there, you've got ground almonds in there giving it lovely moistness. You've also got alcohol in the fruit, you've got the spices. So really it doesn't matter what yellow fat you use, apart from I wouldn't use low fat spreads, because literally there isn't enough fat in them. Margarine and butter both contain 85% fat, and that's the ratio that you need. But really, is butter better than margarine? It's down to you. Okay, next ingredient down, soft brown sugar. I've got the dark brown sugar, soft sugar. Okay, and you can see the very fine sort of grains that is. It's a lovely colour. It gives the cake, or one of the ingredients that gives it its lovely colour. So go for the darker, but don't forget it's these small grains. Don't bring golden granulated. Don't use anything with a very big grain. You want something that's more the size of caster sugar, but you do want it this lovely golden or dark brown colour. So that is something to stock up in, to get in the store cupboard. The other thing, or one of the other things that's going to give it its colour, is this beautiful black treacle. And I would get some of that in. It lasts basically forever in your cupboard, so you can use the tin over several years. Molasses sugar gives it that lovely malted flavour, and also gives it that lovely dark colour that is, you know, what you want to see inside a rich fruit cake. And then eggs, of course. And this recipe uses a lot of eggs. So I've got 5 here. I need to get another 3 for the size of the cake that I'm using, that I'm making. So, you know, over the next week or so, start filling your store cupboards with the things that you need. Okay. And what you can do before you make the cake is what I'm going to show you now. Okay, so today we're not making the cake, but we are going to prepare the fruit. So I've got my my cherries in the water. I'm now going to add all of those currants, and you will do this with all of your dried fruit. I've already done half of my dried fruit. And I remember my own teacher of food at school showing us this, and we were amazed. Look at how dirty the water has become already. If I zoom out a little bit so that you can see a better angle of the water there, you can see how dirty the water is. So what my teacher used to say to me, and I would say to everybody who's going to make one of these cakes, do not miss this stage of the process out. Okay, you're not making the cake this week. This is literally preparing the fruit a week, at least a week before you make a cake. Okay, and literally just run it between your fingers like so, to dislodge the dirt, dust and anything else that's gone into the bag of fruit. And then what I'm going to do, which of course I can do in school because I've got the opportunity, all you need to do is to pour that through a sieve down the sink to get rid of it, and then wash it again. And my teacher used to say, do it 3 times. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick handfuls up and put the handfuls into a clean bowl of clean warm water, or lukewarm water. And that's what I'm going to do now. So I'm literally just hoovering it up like so. There we go. So let's just move some of that back down, pick it up. Now, for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to move that one out of the way. I know there's some fruit still left in there, but this is the second bowl. Okay, so let's pretend all of the fruit's been washed once and it's all in here. Okay, and do it again. So this is the second wash, and you'll notice that the water isn't quite so dirty the second time, but you're still going to dislodge some, just like that. And then you will, at home, you will again pour that through a sieve, trap all the fruit in the sieve, and put the fruit back into the bowl, a nice clean washing up bowl, clean and dried, disinfected if you want to, but don't forget to get rid of the disinfectant. Okay, and then this is the third wash. So what I'm doing now is I'm literally taking handfuls of all of the fruit. You can see that there is still a little bit of sort of cloudiness in the bowl. So again, for sake of brevity, I'm just going to move that one out the way as well. And then with this one, this is the third one. Now this time, when I've washed it, I'm going to get a couple of tea towels ready. And this time I'm actually going to put the third wash of fruit onto two dry and clean tea towels, like so. So I think that's the third wash, and I do the sieving down the sink again. And this time, instead of putting them into another bowl of water or putting them back into the bowl and putting some warm water on top of them, you can do it in cold water. It's just easier on your hands if you use warm water, a bit of cold and a bit of boiled water. Okay, and again, for brevity, I'm just going to move that out the way. Don't worry, I'm not going to waste it. And then when you've put the fruit onto your tea towels, spread the fruit out, put the radio on or listen to something on the television or something, have a chat with someone. And then literally you will need, this is especially relevant with things like sultanas and raisins, because you do tend to find there are sort of plenty of little stalks left on dried fruit. Currants tend to be better. But it's amazing how many bits of twig, stalk, leaves sometimes that you find actually left behind. And what you should do is literally spend half an hour picking over it. And of course, what you're doing is you're spreading it out and letting it air dry as well. And you're getting rid of anything in there that shouldn't be in there. And you know, put them in the bin as you come across them, little bits of, I don't know what that is, but that shouldn't be in there. This is well worth the time. If you've ever had a piece of cake, very rich fruit cake, and you've crunched on something, it's an indication that somebody hasn't spent the time actually going through or going over the fruit and getting rid of all of those stalks. Now, when you've done that and you're satisfied that you can't find any more stalks in there to get rid of, that's the point that you get your container that you're going to put all of your fruit in, raisins, currants, sultanas, cherries, mixed peel as well, and put them into the container. And now you're going to pour your alcohol all over your fruit. Okay. Try not to put the container somewhere warm because you don't want it to ferment. You don't want it to change the flavor. But I keep mine in the fridge and the alcohol still goes into the fruit regardless of the temperature, like so. So I'm now going to get my bottle of sherry and I'm literally going to cover as much of it as I can. There you go. Now that can be covered over either with cling film or a lid if you've got a lid for your jar, and that can sit in the fridge for a week until you actually come to make the cake. And in a week's time you'll see that come out of hibernation and I'll be using it next week. And these tiny little bits, these tiny little currants will have doubled inside and, sort of really swollen up so that they are nicely swelled and juicy. Okay, so that's it for preparation for this week. It is literally getting things in the cupboard and preparing the fruit, washing it 3 times, drying it, picking over it, and soaking it if you're going to. If not, you can put it inside a container just to keep dry, but you know that it's nice and clean and ready to use when you need it. Okay, but all of that needs to happen, before you make the cake. And I will see you next week when we actually prepare the tin for cooking and we make the actual cake itself.